Thunder Strike Back. 8 Ministry of Defense. Author, Wild Wolverine. When Captain Goya woke up, a small Do-228 liaison aircraft of Air Force Headquarters Secret Service Squadron, X, had landed at Bareilly Field. He and his partner Jafar refitted and took the plane to New Delhi. This day has been 11 days since the terrorist attack in Mumbai. The Indian government needs to show some achievements to explain to the angry people. The Bareilly base is very close to New Delhi, only an hour away by plane. As the plane lowered its altitude to land at the Maud military airfield near Delhi's Camden Gate, the lieutenant could see an old-fashioned Spitfire and Vampire on the tarmac at the nearby Air Force Museum, next to Delhi Airfield. There are also some MiG-23s that have been eliminated in recent years. He still remembers the first time he came here when he was in middle school. He was immediately inspired by the deeds of air combat heroes and decided to join the Air Force. The air combat record is exaggerated, and in general, the total number of fighter jets lost by the Indian side in the previous Indo-Pakistani conflicts is much higher. After they got off the plane, a special car sent by the Ministry of Defense took them directly to the reception room on the first floor of the Ministry of Defense. After waiting for about 5 minutes, a tall man wearing a Sikh turban came over. The visitor introduced himself as Lieutenant, the head of the Office of Defense Minister Singh, looking serious and unsmiling. Then he took the initiative to talk about yesterday's battle, mainly about the second result. Lieutenant Goya told him that he couldn't confirm it, but the squadron got information that the plane did not return to the airport where he took off. This answer made the supervisor wrinkle frown. "Lieutenant, there's one thing you don't know. Just last night, the 7th Wing lost 2 Jaguars. Congress doesn't know about it, but it will. It's F-16s of the 5th what?" Jafar demanded. "Please listen to me first, Lieutenant. It doesn't matter which squadron of the enemy did it, what matters is that the politicians and the people are very much looking forward to some heroes so that they will continue to trust and rely on the Ministry of Defense to resolve the conflict this time." The supervisor paused for a while after speaking, and neither of the two pilots understood exactly what he meant. "It's very simple. Congress doesn't have the patience to understand the complexities of air combat. If you and Lieutenant Goya are unwilling to take on such responsibilities, I don't think it will do any good for the future of the two of you. The Chief of Staff is very blatant. He made it clear to Goya and Jafar that he needed an ace pilot who shot down 2 enemy planes to show the public that big defense budgets paid off. If the members of the lower house of the Lok Sabha heard that we were 1-2 behind in this debate, they would wonder if the investment over the years was worth it. You should be able to understand that all the fools are using it's a matter of subtraction. But the military's funding depends on the review of these laymen. I think, we understand what you mean, sir," Goya said. "Mr. Singh will meet with you later. I don't think he will ask about it, but this afternoon, if the Prime Minister asks about it, you can tell him that you clearly saw the second enemy plane. It crashed in the mountains of northwestern Kashmir." "We know." Goya and Jafar replied softly together. The master nodded in satisfaction. "One other thing, His Excellency the Minister is very interested in the shot-down second aircraft because he heard that it is a new type of Thunderbolt fighter jets and Pakistan is about to deploy a large number of Thunderbolt fighters. Mr. Supervisor, I think, this is a very, very difficult opponent, especially in the pursuit of medium and low altitudes. I think it is necessary for Air Force pilots to be alert to this new opponent." Goya said. This answer once again made the supervisor was not satisfied. "Lieutenant, I have a piece of advice. You can say these words to your wing commander or Air Force Chief of Staff, but not to the Minister. Mr. Minister is planning a counterattack, so he does not like this kind of negative view. It must be emphasized we have an absolute advantage in technology." "Completely understand." Goya and Jafar replied at the same time, and they suddenly came to their senses, and suddenly understood all the essentials that the director wanted to convey in the previous conversation. "Oh yes, Minister Singh asked me to tell you too, each of you will get a Warrior Will medal for this victory. The rank of captain, of course, will be promoted in a few days. Then, you can choose to continue stay in 24 Squadron and be a top pilot, or go to TACTA, Air Combat School, to be an instructor, or... Luyadnahan stopped and deliberately sold his words. Jafar and Goya didn't dare to guess, they all waited for him to speak. Everyone, the newly reconstituted 43 Squadron lacks a deputy squadron leader. This new squadron will be equipped with China's latest Glorious, LCA, fighter jets, which are really tough fighter jets, not cheap Thunderbolts fighter. I believe that if there is an air combat hero willing to go, he will be promoted to major soon. Luyadnahan's words made Jafar's heart pound, and he knew that Goya would not choose to leave Bar. Advantage, but it's a perfect opportunity for itself, and in Air Force tradition, recoil weapons operators tend to have less advancement opportunities than pilots. I think the two of you are smart people. You should have understood the main point of what I said. Get ready, the minister will be here soon. Luyadnahan walked out of the reception room and came to an ordinary office on the second floor. The defense minister, Rushman Singh, was turning his back to the gate, looking at the capital in the distance. They all understand what I mean? Singer asked. They are wise men, Your Excellency, replied Luyadnahan. I think this is also what Prime Minister Kahan wants. Your Excellency, this afternoon's special defense budget will definitely be passed. Luyadnahan said with an eyeful look. Humph, this is just the first step. You are my most trusted subordinate, you should know that I have been working on one thing for all these years, which is to solve the Pakistani problem once and for all. Ordinary politicians only know how to exploit their own selfish interests and can never understand the painstaking efforts of Prime Minister Kahan and India must end this unfavorable geopolitical situation as soon as possible. Your Excellency, I know what you mean, India cannot let the events of 1962 happen again. Then we can concentrate on the stronger one. War depends on determination, and if the enemy makes up his mind before us, we will be dragged down by them in both directions. Singh turned and said, his face pale but full of confidence. But Your Excellency, the army staff may be another trouble. All the plans made are always petty, and they are afraid that a full-scale war on Pakistan will weaken our defense against the Chinese direction. Yes, I know Paz well. Admiral Ade, he is always weaker than the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but at a critical time, I can find someone to replace him as the Army Chief of Staff. By the way, speaking of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency Minister, they told me that the United Nations may send a special envoy to mediate our border conflict with Pakistan within 2 days, and the candidate is likely to be a former president of the Democratic Party of the United States. The Foreign Office seems to be eager to quell the conflict. Relax. The Prime Minister will not accept such a humiliation. In the end, the Prime Minister said that our country is the victim of terrorism, and it is not the Americans' turn to pull the strings. What we have done is no different from what they have done in Afghanistan. However, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs believes that the terrorist attack occurred in Mumbai, 1,700 kilometers from the conflict zone of Kashmir. The Foreign Ministry considers it a headache to convince the international community. It's not surprising, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is always like this. Also, Your Excellency, the Pakistani side said this morning that some planes practicing nuclear attacks have crossed their borders, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is afraid that they will mislead international public opinion. Humph, it's just nonsense. They think that there is one permanent member of the United Nations to support them, and we have the other 4. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs should make full use of our diplomatic resources. I really don't know what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is afraid of. That's it, Secretary Chandradai called and asked where the 2 American planes crashed. I told them that they were still investigating and that one of the pilots was missing. Luyadnahan answered truthfully. It's really a tricky thing. If the pilots fall into their hands, there is indeed some trouble. We have to be careful everywhere before the official war, Singh said. I think I have to report something new about this matter, the supervisor said. Singer nodded for him to continue. The 7th Wing reported in the morning that one of the Jaguars was indeed modified to carry nuclear weapons. If the self-destruction device did not work, the latest attack route information can be found in the computer system in the cockpit, some of which are preset routes for dropping nukes. This will work for their propaganda. Plus there are things like frontline airfields and IFFs that, if they get into their hands, can also cause a lot of trouble for the frontline air force. Is it possible that the pilot is still alive? Your Excellency, it is April, and if you fall there overnight, you may have frozen to death. Lujitnahan said carefully. Well, don't take it lightly, you go and call the Northern Military Region and ask them to send a small team to look for it, at least to destroy the wreckage of the plane. Well, now is the time to meet those two young people. Already. When the Minister of Defense pushed the door into the reception room, two pilots in neat uniforms immediately stood up from the sofa and stood at attention. They waited almost 15 minutes with bated breath. Now the time has come. Guys, that's great, tell me how it feels to take down an enemy. Rashman Singh asked with a smile, with the expressionless supervisor standing behind him, and Goya thought this was a can't go wrong time. It's like a fireball in the air, Mr. Minister. Well, good analogy, it reminds me of 1971, when I was a tank gunner in the 19th Panzer Division, and I hit the turret of an M48, watching it burn is such a spectacle. We're going to shoot down all invading enemy planes, Jafar said with his chest raised. Very well, that's it, tell me, how about that new enemy plane that Pakistan has been boasting about for a long time? Jafar quietly turned his face to Goya, hoping that he would answer this question. The lackluster light fighter, whether it is an air battle within or outside the line of sight, is completely vulnerable. Goya replied calmly, for some reason, the moment he spoke, it was the one that appeared in front of him. The scene of the light blue plane turning above him was so clear that he could see the two missiles on the wingtips, as if he could see it more clearly than he could see in actual combat. Time is running out. Get ready, guys. We have to go to Parliament in the afternoon. The Prime Minister needs you. I hope your heroic achievements will enlighten the elm heads of those leftists in the House of Commons.